these original caretakers in the region. As an academic community, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with these tribes and Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. We also pledge that these relationships will consist of mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. Thank you all for participating in WSU's First Gen celebrations. We encourage you to visit the First Generation Celebrations website to learn more about other First Gen events coming up, and show your support for First Gen individuals by posting on social media with the hashtags WSU and Celebrate First Gen. Our speaker this evening is Jordan Frost. Mr. Frost will speak to his personal story of being a First Gen Coug, discuss the personal and institutional barriers he had to overcome, and offer advice for students to become academically engaged at WSU. At the end of the presentation, we will have time for questions. The chat function is disabled, so please post your questions to the Q&A for our moderators to read, or you can ask aloud. Jordan Frost is Activities Director at Issaquah High School. Jordan earned his master's degree in teaching in 2019 and his bachelor's in history in 2018, both from Washington State University. Frost was elected president of ASWSU for the Pullman campus his senior year. He continued his advocacy as student regent during his graduate program. Though Jordan's career is just beginning, his accomplishments are extensive and growing. He continues to give back to WSU and supports efforts to increase equity and inclusion in the state of Washington. It is for this reason that Jordan Frost has been awarded WSU's inaugural First Generation Alumni Excellence Award. Presented by the Office of Academic Engagement, this award recognizes alumni who exemplify and embody the engagement, resilience, and excellence of first-gen students in higher education. Due to COVID limitations, we are unable to present Jordan with his plaque today, but hopefully he'll share it with us on social media when he receives it in the mail. Please join me in welcoming our speaker and the inaugural recipient of the First Gen Alumni Excellence Award, Jordan Frost.
Well, thank you so much, Allie. It's really good to see you and to be here with everyone tonight. I have prepared a presentation, so in theme with what I've been doing all day at Issaquah High, I'm going to share my screen with you all. But I really am excited to be here tonight and engage with all of you and talk about my journey. All right. So thinking about being a first-gen student, thinking about overcoming barriers, I just kind of want to start and give you context with where I am today. So today, I'm the only African-American male administrator in the Issaquah School District. I served as student regent, as Allie mentioned, as a statewide leader, received my master's degree, have been a keynote speaker, and a list of other things that Allie's mentioned. And all of these things that I go through, I think about, I'm like, wow, and people see that, and they're like, that's just amazing, you're always killing it, you're getting it done. But I actually don't want to talk about any of those extensively today. What I really want to focus on is the difficult things, the setbacks, the failures, the hardships. And I really want to center this talk on 3 pivotal moments of my life and connect those with 3 lessons that I think led to my successes. Sometimes when we look at failure, we think that we succeed in spite of failure, but I actually believe that we succeed because of failure, because of challenges and what it takes to overcome those. So let me take you way back. Let me take you to, I don't even think I was in elementary yet at this time. Really loved reading. As a matter of fact, I loved reading so much, I had my mom get me a dictionary and I would sit down and I would read the dictionary. And you're probably wondering, how do you read a dictionary? Because it's not a book. And you're right. I just wanted to learn new words and learn how to use them. Really talkative. I don't think that's changed much. Love to play outside. And Arthur was my favorite cartoon. I can't even explain why, but Arthur the Aardvark was my favorite cartoon. But the first thing I want to talk about is a very early setback. So at the age of 3, my parents divorced and my dad went to prison. And to this day, he's never really been in my life. As a matter of fact, I remember standing in the kitchen with my mom and sisters and her telling us the news. My mom was left to care for me and my two sisters with a lot of debt, and that led to me living in poverty from the age of 3 all the way up until 22 when I graduated from college. So where was I destined? I remember a day in class, and a teacher was reading off stats. And I'm going to read through the stats the teacher wrote through. Number 1, children of incarcerated parents are more likely to drop out of school. Number 2, children who are born into poverty are likely to live in poverty as adults. Number 3, children who live in poverty have a higher risk of developing mental illness. And this is the exact quote. Black male teens have the highest death rate in the country. Really, they're lucky if they make it to the age of 18. And here I am sitting in this classroom and I'm checking all the boxes. I'm like, oh man, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I carried each of those things with me from the day I heard them. These were the labels. This was the destiny that society and the statistics and this teacher had labeled on me. And I look back to high school and everything was just harder. I couldn't go on the trips everyone else went on. I didn't get new school clothes every year. Didn't get that car when I turned 16. And I think these are experiences that a lot of first generation students can relate to. I made up for it by being super involved. I really wanted to hide everything else that was happening in my life. And I just wanted people to see the good. And I thought that if I worked harder than anyone else to make up for what I didn't have, I'd be okay. And as I think about elementary to high school, I experienced poverty, sexual abuse, domestic abuse, and really school was the safe place. It was the best part of my day. It was the only time where I felt safe and comfortable. And that brings me to lesson number 1. Your circumstances do not determine your destiny. It is so easy to fall into labels that society and others put on us. But you really can't control what happens to you, but you certainly can control what you do next. It took me years to even come to be able to share the things I shared on the last slide. But once I did, I felt a freedom. You acknowledge your hardships, you give yourself time to deal with them, and make a plan to move forward. Truly, and this is kind of a quote that people say, but I found this to be the truth, that nothing lasts forever. You will get through it. But if you allow your circumstances to determine your destiny, to limit your potential, they will. But you have the power to overcome them in the end. The next thing I want to talk about is an academic barrier coming to WSU. My path to WSU was not easy. Again, people look at the accomplishments and assume it was a smooth sail. But I remember applying and getting on the phone with the WSU staff member, and they said, I think you should consider community college. I just don't think you're the right fit for WSU. This probably won't work out. And in that one phone call, all of my dreams, all of my hopes were crushed. I didn't want to think about going to community college and transferring later. I didn't want to think about trying again in another year. I thought I had done everything right to get to where I needed to be. But in that phone call, it almost deterred me from pursuing my future. But I fast forward years later as a graduate of the institution, a direct, stark contrast to the conversation that I had with the individual on the phone. And I want to add a little note here. Really, as we talk about how to be academically successful as a first-year student, you have to look for your champions, right? The person on the phone was not my champion. But I felt really blessed that along the way at WSU to have countless advisors. And I give a special shout out to Frank Hill and Lori Sue at the College of Arts and Sciences, the history department, but various employers at WSU. Ashley Safransky is one that comes right off the top of my head. Support staff like Allie, who helped me through the Atlas program, and different mentors that pushed me to be my best. One of the real secrets, although it shouldn't be a secret, to overcoming barriers in the academic setting is to find your champions and lean on them. Take every opportunity they present, apply to everything, join every group that's interesting. People really make all the difference. They'll send you emails and you'll be tired and say, I can't read anything else, especially after Zooming all day. You just want to be done with the computer, but these are the opportunities that will open doors for you later in your life. So lesson number 2, as I think about the phone call and I think about WSU, is only you can determine your value. Our society does a really poor job of always trying to assign value to us. Your grades, your test scores, your income, all of these things we use to try to evaluate each other and people. But really, at the end of the day, it's only you. All that matters is you have a belief in yourself and that you believe that anything is possible, anything is achievable. You have to stay persistent and work hard because life is far too long for you to be discouraged by an external measure of your worth. I'm sure you have a moment in your life where someone spoke down to you, someone discouraged you. And if you look back at that moment and think, if you accepted every single statement that someone has made, you wouldn't be anywhere. If I had taken that phone call and said, that's it, he's right, I wouldn't be close to where I am today. So you have to believe that your value is inside. It's not external. It's not the numbers. It's not the measures. It's you and your ability to work through things that come your way. The last life moment I want to bring up has to do with involvement. My first big campus role at WSU was ASWSU freshman delegate. And I'm telling you, I remember the excitement, the feeling. I called my mom and said, I got this position. This is awesome, right? And technically, I had served as president of Scott Coleman, like my residence hall, but this was big time. This was ASWSU, campus-wide. And after a month, I hated it. The culture was terrible. And I really felt like an outsider because I came from a different background. I truly felt that I was an outcast, that people didn't want to connect with me and didn't want to talk with me. It was the hardest thing for me to do, but I remember walking on the practice fields over by the library and calling my mom and saying, I'm going to quit. I'm going to be done. I'm leaving. This is not for me. And I thought by quitting that day that I was barring myself from ever having a chance at leadership again. I said, if you do this, you will never be able to lead or be in a leadership role at WSU again. Later in my college career, I got another shot at ASWSU, and this time I was a little different position as chief of staff. But again, I really struggled. I struggled with the work. I struggled with the people. I struggled with what am I actually doing and accomplishing? And I still have the email that says, I will never be part of that organization again. I sent it to a friend of mine and I said, I won't do it. I don't like it. It's not for me. I tried twice, but I'm done. And then I fast forward a year from that email and I was elected president of the same association that I had decided to quit and leave twice already. So this brings me to lesson number 3. You can't be afraid to be selfish. Now, when I say selfish, I'm not talking about hoarding snacks from your siblings or hiding things from friends and not wanting to share. But I mean, when it comes to taking care of yourself, above everything else, you have to take care of yourself. If you do things for the right reasons, people will respect you. And it's hard. It is so hard because we are trained, many of us, especially first-gen students, we are told you don't quit, you persevere, you go through it, you suffer, you struggle. That's part of life. And it is, in some aspects it is, but there are times when you know something's not right. And you know that your health is being put at risk by being involved, by staying. And at that moment, you have to make a change. But I encourage you to build relationships in everything that you do. A direct tie to the story I just told, when I was a freshman delegate, there was a senator. Her name was Haley Homan, still a wonderful friend of mine. And I remember quitting. Years later, Haley was the person who recommended me for the chief of staff job because Haley had been in that role. And had she not have done that, I would have never ran for president of the organization. A lot of that accomplishments, the things I accomplished, were really because of that experience I had as the chief of staff. And so in that I say, keep the door open. When I quit as a delegate, I would have never have imagined that I would end up running the same organization one day that I quit twice. But life is unpredictable and you can't count things out. Just because things went one way one time does not mean that's how they'll go the rest of the time. And so to ultimately, to think about this idea, my message to you is that failure and hardships will set you up for success. Life is a really long, windy road with a lot of bumps and potholes and twists and turns. Things don't always go the way that we anticipated they'll go. And I think the messaging that we get wrong sometimes is that it's bad to fail, that it's bad to struggle. But I would push back and say, lean into failure. Because sometimes the lessons are not apparent. Sometimes it just sucks. And you say, there's no way there's a lesson here. There's no way I can learn from this, but truly, you will, and you can. Because I've learned that even in the lowest and darkest moments, there is a lesson. There is something waiting, that you're being prepared constantly for the next opportunity, the next challenge. And you can never lose sight of your dreams. That is what motivates us. There's none of this talk about well, dreams aren't realistic and you got to be real. No, I reject that. I think the dreams are realistic. And I think the bigger you dream, the bigger the challenges will be, which means the greater the successes will be in your life. And I really encourage you to cherish your story. I just shared with you parts of my story. And I think stories are important because they're a reminder of what we've been through so that we know what we are capable of. There are battle scars so that every time we look and every time we face a new challenge, we can look back and say, I've been here before. I've conquered this. I've done things that are harder than this. I've been told that I wouldn't amount to anything. I've been told I didn't have an opportunity. I've been told that people like me can't do things like this. But you have that story and you hold on to that story because you can always look back and remember you are capable. Our stories give us perspective so that we encounter someone with similar struggles, we know how to lend a helping hand. I still remember this quote from WSU Regent Scott Carson. And one time he kind of just slowed down and got real with me and said, Jordan, you never forget where you came from. Never forget what you've been through. And always go back to the place where you started and lift other people up. That's really what your story is about. It gives you purpose. It says, I've accomplished this. I know others can, but sometimes we need a little push. We need a little help. And that's what our stories can do for us. So that even if we get big and rich and famous and make it to this point, we don't forget where we were and we don't forget the people like us who need a hand up. My story is what led me to be in education now, because education gave me an opportunity at a better life. And I want others to have the same. When I look at my students, I see myself. And I remember, what did I need at that time? What was important to me and what adults made a difference? And I replicate that. Just today, I was working with some of my students who are credit deficient. They're a little behind. They face a lot of barriers. They're first-gen students. Life's tough, but they worked their butts off. And one of them, I remember telling her I was really proud of her. And I could see her smile just shift. And it was just happiness and joy. And it reminded me of purpose. It took me back. Because right now she's in a place in her life, just like where I was, where we're working hard, we're doing our best, but life's still tough. So let your story fuel the work that you do. Let your story fuel who you are, and never forget it. Don't wear it as a badge of shame, but you wear it as a badge of honor. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. And at this time, I would love to answer any questions that you all might have.
Jordan, we have a question in the question and answer box.
Yeah, let's see.
The question is, if you have only had limited involvement in school, but have confidence in your abilities, how can one express that to graduate school or companies?
Oh, that's good.
Thank you, Michelle, for that question.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Michelle. So I would really say, as you think about graduate schools and companies, they're looking for experience, but also I think sometimes we limit what experience is important. And so we say, unless I've been in this formal high role, I can't consider that. But I would argue that you've probably done lots of things, maybe smaller things throughout your time that are marketable. The goal is, what is the skill? What is the result of what I've done, right? So rather than I served in this role, because you can serve in a high position and not accomplish a lot, but you can also be a volunteer at an organization that started, maybe, let's say you're volunteering at a food bank and you started distributing to 10 families, but by the time you were done, because a new idea that you had, you were distributing to 50 families. So I would just challenge you to think about what you've done and to reframe that thought. And I promise you that there's some things in your time that you've done that are valuable to graduate schools and to companies. They want to know who you are and what you can do. And it's not always limited by what you've done. Sometimes you have to express in a different way and talk about, when I talk to my high schoolers, it's like, okay, you say you haven't been involved, but you helped your parents raise a family of 5, right? Your mom was at work and you were primary caretaker and you balanced school. Like, you got skills from that. You learned a lot from that and you have a lot of value because of that. And so you really it's about framing and the way you have that conversation, and the way you brag about yourself. That's why I say people are scared to brag. That's not a very American thing to do, but you don't do it in a braggy way, but you do it in a way that says, hey, I know some stuff. I've learned some things and here's how it can be applicable to your organization or to your university. Very welcome.
Good afternoon, Jordan. Thank you so much for that. It was fantastic to hear you speak again. I have a question about, so now you have the privilege and the honor of, you experience academic life as a student, and now you get to see it from the other perspective as an educator. In light of COVID-19 and the difficulties that students and teachers have gone through, all the way to K-12 system, but also college and universities. What would you say to a student that is struggling to adapt to the new learning environment so that they can continue achieving what they were setting out themselves to?
Yeah, that's excellent. And you're right. I have those conversations every day with my high schoolers. I think the one thing that I've noticed, and I wasn't always really good at this either, is back to that finding your champions piece, knowing where resources are and letting them know that you need help. It's amazing how many of my kids just refuse to ask for help because they're struggling. So that would be my first suggestion for people, is find support and ask for it. The second thing is, when you're so overwhelmed, when you're so behind, when you're so discouraged, you have to find your center in some way. Like, you have to get yourself back to a really a level point to where you can then launch and be successful from then on. So maybe you say Q1 was horrible, or whatever system. I know WSU is different, right? But this part of this was terrible. Sit on that, reflect on that. Okay, what went really well? What did I do really well? What went not so well? And what can I improve? And then look to the future. I think sometimes, especially in academic setting, when we get so behind, we're discouraged because we're like, there's no way I can fix that. And I don't think that's always the only option out. Sometimes it's planning ahead and saying, okay, going forward from here, here's how I'm going to address this. And just finding those small strategies to get more organized, and try one at a time. Sometimes we'll go meet with a counselor or someone and they'll say, here's A, B, C, D, and E that you can do, right? It's even more overwhelming. Find the one thing that's interesting, stick to it, and implement that. And it's just a slow, I know it sounds like no, I got to fix it now. But I hate that messaging because it's not true. It's a slower process. You have to give yourself time, communicate, over communicate. If you are in a class right now and you are struggling, over communicate with your professor, TA, whoever it is. We've all been there. People think because I'm a teacher, I was a model student. That is not true at all. There's been times where I've needed to say, hey, professor, I'm really behind and I need help. I need strategies. I need ways to get out of this. And I found that every person at WSU that I've worked with was more than willing to extend that grace if you would do the work. So I would say if someone's really, really behind, just give themselves a hard stop, say that's done and passed with, and start building goals moving forward, and put their energy toward that. Ooh, life motto. Okay. I would say my life motto is always strive to be better. I think the quote I give my students is every day is an opportunity for you to be the best version of you, so that you're always looking for ways to grow. You're always looking for ways to develop. As a teacher, I live this, right? This day was a great lesson, but tomorrow I bet I can be a little better. I bet I can get one more student engaged. In life, as a brother, as a son, okay, I got my mom this nice gift for her birthday, but I know I can communicate more, right? And I think in all areas of our lives, professional, personal, academic, if we live with this model of constant improvement, that we're never a finished product, but we're always in production, I think we just become better people every day by always looking to improve and grow. It's a great question. All right, how do you accept failure openly? Then, yeah. So I think it's hard, right? I'll just start and say it's difficult. And it took me years. The things I'm talking about today, I was not always able to talk about growing up. It kind of took some self-reflection. It took some patience and some time with just myself. Like, okay, this sucks. This hurts. But honestly, hearing other people, my mom was very open about failing, right? Like she was very clear with us about here's how I didn't succeed. Here's where things went wrong. So seeing other people that were where I want to be and hearing them talk about their failures and overcome them, I think gave me a lot of confidence. And just being more confident in myself. And again, that's just something that takes time. It's not automatic, but I think it's worth the work. Like an easy start is to look back on your failures, okay? So the best way to accept them, I started journaling first, and just getting it out on paper, I found, was like a release for me. And then slowly from there, I was able to talk about it. So first you gotta write it down. You gotta get it out somehow, maybe not publicly. And then that just builds your confidence in being able to share it. It's self-work, which is like tough work, but it's important work to do. And it takes time, but I think it's really worthwhile. So my recommendation would just be to start with you. You have to learn to accept it in yourself. Talk about it, think about it. Don't dwell on it, but think about what it meant to your life. What did this failure mean? And what can I connect it to today? And then you'll kind of build from there. That's an excellent question. All right, how do you develop your goals? Yeah, this is good. So I like to I'm very systematic. I like to break my life up in parts. So, I have family goals, I have relationship goals, I have academic goals and work goals. So I just start and say, and this actually kind of answers the next question, I think about where do I see myself, right? In a year, in 5 years, like what ultimately do I want, okay? And what I've figured out is that what I want is stability. Okay? That's something that I didn't have, and I think other first-gen students can relate to. I really want stability. I want to be comfortable. I want to be safe. And then I take those themes and I say, what can I do to get to that point, right? So I knew one way to be safe and comfortable and have stability was to get an education. So then I set a goal that I was going to go to college, right? And I achieved that goal. The next step was I had to get a job, right? What kind of job do I want? I want to teach. So the goal was I got to get my master's in teaching, right? And then you just kind of build from there. So really start with what do you care about? What do you want in life? And then say, what can I do to get that? And then set your goals according to that. And then I think when it comes to personal goals, that's very different in some ways because it requires communication with other people, which is hard for us sometimes to ask people what they need from us. I think it's hard for us to ask for help, but it's also to ask others what they need from us. But you just got to listen openly, and then you'll learn and you'll find those goals for sure. So thank you, Arlette, for the question. Okay. Oh, next 5 years. I can give you 3 different answers. No. So I really enjoy and love what I'm doing right now. I find a lot of purpose in the work I'm doing. I find a lot of joy. A little bit of it has been taken away with COVID because I can't see kids and be in the classroom and in the building. But I don't see myself leaving. I certainly see myself advancing through the field of education. As you kind of get into organizations, you start to see things that bother you. And there's a couple different approaches you can take. 1, you can accept them as they are. 2, you can complain and live with them. Or 3, you can go change them. And I've always been of the orientation of, I want to change them because I believe that we can better serve our student population by doing A, B, and C. When I was at WSU, it was, there's these things happening on campus, whether it was sexual assault prevention, mental health awareness, finances, right? I was like, I have ideas of how we can do that better, how we can improve the student experience overall for WSU. And that inspired me to then run for office. And as I took on a new position this year as activities director, there was just ways I could see things going. So I could see myself still being in a school building, either in this current capacity or at a higher administrative level. I could also see myself in some kind of civic position. I'm always itching to like get civically engaged, and government is really interesting to me. I don't know that I'd ever run for anything because that's just like a really big task, but I do care a lot about policy and thinking about, you know, I feel like I've lived, and I've still got a lot left, but I feel like I've lived a good life from where I came. And I want to see other young people have the same opportunity. And I think policy has a lot to do with that. So definitely advocating, and Twitter right now is my platform, but I may move beyond that and starting to think about ways that we can build a better society. So thank you for that great question.
Jordan, I have another question for you, and I think you alluded it to in some of your presentation, but you know, oftentimes for first generation students, we get messages that it's not possible, that we don't belong in institutions of higher learning. As somebody that might have experienced some of that messaging, what would you say to a first year student who is still trying to find their place because of messaging that they perhaps received as they were going through educational system?
Yeah, that's, you know, as I think about what got me through the discouraging message, it's actually my sister, who after I got off the phone and I said, you know, they said I can't go, whatever. And she's like, yeah, that's crap, you're going anyway. But I think those of you that have made it here, like sometimes you have to stop and realize what you've accomplished already, right? Like, I think part of being first gen is always feeling like you have to do more, and you have to prove more, but getting to college is a huge accomplishment. So you got to stop and give yourself some credit for that. The second thing is, in terms of finding your place, when we think about like what place they're talking about, I think you have to distance yourself from that, right? Because first of all, you've made it, so you're already in the place. Second of all, there's probably groups that you're part of or different associations that you're part of that can help you feel more of a sense of place. I know if I wasn't really involved, I don't know how well I would have done at WSU. I think that became, I created a place for myself. And I think sometimes we have to do that in order to feel a sense of place. But again, so much of this is shifting your mindset and being able to get yourself to a point where you can just say, that person's wrong. Flat out, they're wrong. I did make it. I did get out of that spot. And even though what I'm going through now is hard, remembering back to where you've been and to where you are now can do so much for you mentally. Sometimes we forget things that we've been through because we're like, okay, just got to keep moving. Stop for a second, ask yourself, what have I gone through in my life? Where am I today? And then use that to fuel. Okay, someone told me that I don't belong here. This isn't the first time that I've been told I don't belong in this space. Think about what that moment was like. Think about how you got through that moment and then let it fuel you. And that kind of goes to the question about how do you learn to publicly accept your failures? Really, you got to find out what they were first and do some work to figure out how you overcame them. And that can often help you. So I think of the same thing when you're looking for your place. Where has been another time in your life where you haven't, where you've been at a place and or been told you don't belong somewhere? And how did you find your place then? We can learn a lot from looking at our own history and things that we've been through.
While we're waiting for additional questions, I have a question, Jordan.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the most interesting experiences that you've had in your leadership positions?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's good. So I think one of the things that was a challenge, once you really learn one place and you find out that other places are not like that place, it can be difficult. So for example, right, I really learned, like, I feel like top to bottom, I know WSU. Like I knew the people, I knew the places, I knew the processes, everything. And now coming to a new place and as a leader, I just kind of want to naturally carry with me what I've already had at WSU and what I thought worked well. And that's not the way that goes. So it's been a challenge trying to navigate a new organization, but then really navigating new relationships. Ultimately, it all comes down to that. And I had the benefit of, by the time I was a regent, I knew a lot of people at WSU, whether it was on a name basis or a deeper basis. And now I'm in this position where I don't know as many people, and I'm tasked with this big work and these big responsibilities. And now I have to find out how to navigate that. So that's been challenging. I think the other thing that's been positive is just really having a deeper understanding of parents. And, when you're in an administrative role, you get a lot more questions that are just beyond the class. And I think sometimes we make assumptions, and I know I have in the past, about like helicopter parents or parents who are just doing too much, but you really start to see like a deeper concern and care for, you understand a parent's perspective a lot better. And you can start to see behind some people's actions, because sometimes we see action and we don't see intention. And this job has really taught me to be able to get to intention and then see how that impacts the action. And then I would say how difficult it's just been to feel like I'm good at it, right? Like I felt like when I was at WSU, I felt like I was good at the work I did and that I was successful. And now I'm not really feeling that. There's waves, right? There's times, but you would think, and I think I made the assumption, well, I was really good at this, so I should be good at this too. But that it doesn't naturally always just push over it that way. So I think another surprise has been just how much I've had to shift even what I do, what I think, what I believe, to be able to get into a new position. I think that talks a lot about coming into college as a first generation student, right? We have skill sets and things that we probably could use more of, right? That we think are not applicable. Whereas in my case, I'm finding that I needed some other skills. I think flipping that, first generation students have a lot of skills that actually can help them succeed in college: resilience, perseverance, and just realizing like you've done some really hard stuff. And college is hard too, but sometimes it's not even harder than some things that people have been through, but we don't give ourselves enough credit. And I've learned in this job, I need to be more graceful with myself. So my message to first gen students would definitely be to give yourself more grace than less, right? It's a hard thing to do, but once you do it, you realize it actually is very helpful in the long run.
Jordan, I have another question that was submitted through me. You mentioned you mentioned finding champions. How can WSU staff and faculty make funding those champions easier so that it's not incumbent upon the students to seek it out?
Yeah, that's good. I think visibility is one, right? And I think this is something that you and Allie are good at, right? Is sometimes pushing a little bit, even when a student tells you they don't need help. There was times that Allie had to push me, where I'd come into the Atlas office. I'm like, yeah, I've got it all figured out. I'm doing this, this, and this. And she's like, well, have you thought about this? And I was like, oh, well, not really, but right. It's like, do you want this resource? No, I don't need it. It's like, well, maybe just take it just in case, right? And so I think some of that, it seems pushy, but actually it helps us know that like, that's someone I can count on. That's someone in a tough moment I can go to and reach out to. And just being pesty, like not pesty, but pester, like not, when I was applying for sophomore speaker, I didn't apply to the last day. But the reason why I applied is because I had multiple emails from the same advisor who was like, don't forget about this, don't forget about this. And at the moment it was annoying, but like, again, I always do, it's the history degree. Tracing back to that and seeing what's happened since, it's like, I'm so grateful that they did that. So sometimes we need, and even in my role at Issaquah, I'm learning this, like, I just have to push sometimes. And I have to put the energy in. And I think a dangerous idea, not dangerous, an idea that's not as student friendly is that, well, you can't force someone who doesn't want to be helped to get help. And that's true in a way, but sometimes it's used as an excuse to just stop trying. And I think that is when people are like, well, they really weren't my champion. So everyone that I can think back to in my mind that was a champion gave me opportunities to do things that I didn't think I was ready for. They over communicated. They were always reaching out. They were very visible, very present. And sometimes they just like saw me sitting somewhere and had a conversation, right? And that gave me a little thing. And then each time just building. So that casual relationship, which turns into the champion relationship, is kind of how I would say it. Like, there were people at WSU that I did not know knew me, but they would like call me out when they saw me and say, hey, I saw this thing and it made me think of you. And some people think that's weird and scary, but I don't. It actually feels good because it's like someone else noticed. And I know you, Allie, Ray, and Michael, you notice kids that you're like, man, they're doing some cool stuff. Maybe you've never met them like deeply in person, but you've read about them in the Evergreen, or you saw them perform at something, right? And it's that outreach that can really help champions be more visible to people so that they don't have to go and do all the work. That's a really great question. And it's something that I feel like is a growing answer. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to get better at that too in my job. Like, how can I let more kids know that I'm available? So it's a growing, developing thing. That's not my final answer. That's my answer today.
While we get more questions, another one was submitted through me. It reads, for many of us, the opportunity to go to college is the first taste at freedom. And oftentimes the decisions that we make are not the best ones when it comes to our goals. How would you, what would you say, or how would you recommend a student who is exploring while remaining focused on why they are achieving a degree?
Yeah, that's really good. And that's very true. I think about, coming from, all of a sudden we get to college and no one's telling us when to wake up, when to go to sleep, what to do, when to eat, all those things. And that freedom can be dangerous. I know for me that first semester, it was, I spent so much time playing sand volleyball at the rec and I should have been at class. I think part of that is, one, do give yourself some space to explore, right? And to learn how to navigate that freedom. I say that with the caveat of don't get yourself off a ledge by doing that. But I do think it's healthy to find the balance between the academic experience and then the social and the engagement experience too, right? People have an idea that you have to have a 4.9, right? Even beyond what's even possible to be successful. That's not true. You don't want to tank your grades, but you also don't want to miss out on opportunities later on in life. that could help you. Like some of the most impactful moments in my life happened outside of the classroom at WSU. Were tied to no class at all, whether it was giving a speech, meeting with a group of people, doing something. So you definitely want to make space for those things. And the only way I think you find balance is by testing it out. But if you give yourself like structured space to explore, I think that can help a lot more, right? You say, okay, I'm gonna commit myself to this many social activities this week, right? And then you've given yourself license to go do that. Then you look back and say, okay, how did that impact me, right? What could I have been doing instead? Yeah, I could have studied and read 500 pages of the textbook, but I gained this, right? And then you just kind of test it out. Some of my students get frustrated because a lot of the learning experience I provide them is like, I want them to try stuff, to mess up, and then let's build from there, right? I don't want to just say like, I know this is how this is going to end up, so don't do it this way. No, I want to say, here's some options. Try them out and see what happens. So I would just really encourage people to experiment, but again, not to the point of like ruining your future, but experiment just enough so that you can learn what your own limits are. Because my sister was someone who was incredibly social and could go do all of these things and was still really successful in the classroom. I needed a little more structure. She was able to live life like, oh, what happens, happens, blah, 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 kind of thing. That wasn't me. So that advice depends on the person. But if you don't already know your limits and how to find balance, you just have to kind of try it out and see what works best for you.
Jordan, I have another question.
Yeah.
How do you, and I feel like this question is unique for COVID, right? So maybe answer this in both ways. During COVID, how to balance, how to make sure that you're taking care of you, which I think we're all kind of struggling with now, but also doing, completing your academic coursework and pursuing that academic engagement. And then beyond COVID, how to do it once we get back to whatever normal will be at that time.
Yeah, right. I'm like, well, can I answer this? Because I don't know that I haven't figured it out yet. What I would say, what's working for me, one, during COVID, I set very clear limits on like work hours, truly. And I've not done that before. In my time at WSU, there was no such thing as workout. Like I just worked all day. And I enjoyed it, but I was just always doing stuff. Now it's very like, once I leave my building or leave my workspace, whatever I'm doing, I'm done. And I'm like truly done. And I say the rest of the night, right? Like I'm going to commit to playing video games, cooking, whatever it is that I'm going to do, but setting that very strict limit. I think that has helped my mental health a lot because otherwise I would simply just work all day long. I think that, beyond COVID, it's a balance of that. But then I also think you have to look at it this way. If I'm feeling better, I will be able to work better, right? And I don't know if this is American culture, Washington State culture, whatever, but there's always this urgency with work. Like you get that email and you have to answer it right now, right? You have to find the answer. I think we just have to get rid of that. One, we have to stop doing it, but two, we have to stop expecting it of other people, right? And I think that's kind of how that relationship starts, because so much of the damage that I think is done when it comes to lack of balance is other people not treating us the way we want to be treated, and then us not doing the same. So I'm not going to send an email to a colleague at 7:30 p.m. I just won't, because I don't want to make them think that they should be responding to that email at that time. One of the building administrators or district administrators in Issaquah says, someone else's lack of planning does not constitute an emergency on my part, right? So you set very clearly, here's when I work, here's when I do this. If it's beyond that, I'm not going to respond. Obviously, if it's an emergency, like you should call the police because I can't help you. But or a call or something like that. But I think those types of boundary limits, they are crucial. It has saved, I wouldn't say saved my life, but I've saved enough time and energy and mental health because I have set such clear limits on what I do. And then just finding those things that are the easy wins right now, I think are the biggest, because we can't do a lot of big stuff. But like going outside to check the mail, I count that as like like an activity, right? Like I go, I take the long way, I read the mail on the way back, because that's just the little things that we can get during this time, and finding, new hobbies. Cooking is a new one, like trying new recipes. That's something I've really gotten into. But I think those boundaries are really important, and then maximizing the small things. So whether it's you take your dog for a walk and you stop instead of keep going when you see a bench or something like that, right? Or you take up some things that you didn't used to be interested in, or that you were interested in, you've given up. Reading, slowing down, kind of being patient. I think those are things that are relevant now and post-COVID, because I think it's worse when we're in person to set those boundaries. But it's like, no, 4:30, I'm out. Someone walks in your office at 4:29, you say, you got 45 seconds to talk to me, and I'm leaving at 4:30, because otherwise we're just working ourselves to death, and there's no joy in that.
Jordan, another question that was submitted. You managed to get into positions to achieve change. Did you feel like you had a model or example for those roles? And what would you tell a first-gen student who feels like they are not ready for the responsibilities they might face?
That's good. In the most base level, I think at the core of every leadership position I do is this idea of service. And there's a couple people. My high school principal, Wade Behringer, who's a Dr. Wade Behringer. I should respect that title because he's got his PhD, and he's a wonderful guy. But he emphasized every time he spoke, everything he did, there was this idea that, like, we lead to serve, right? We do this work because we want people's lives to be better, because we want to make the world a better place. I think my mom, watching her work through her struggles, incredibly impactful for me as a leader. A couple lessons. One, she said, something she would say is, don't be afraid to ask people questions, because the worst they can say is no, like when it came to asking for things. And I carried that with me, because as a regent and as president, I was often asking WSU administrators who don't always like to say yes to things. My goal was to try to get them to say yes to things, right? And so that lack of fear that she had, and just that straight up frontness, was really impactful in my leadership experience. And then I would say, when it comes to developing a model of your own, you really have to find the reason or the purpose of why you're doing that thing. So sometimes we get into leadership positions because it's a leadership position, or because it's good on a resume, but that won't sustain you. And I don't think people that do that are successful. Whether it's service, whether it's hope, whether it's, care, whatever it is, you've got to find that thing. And what happens is people will see that in the work that you do, right? Everyone that you encounter that you do, they will see that. And for a first-year student, like I said, I just think, and this is not to discredit people who are not first-gen students at all, but specifically to first-gen students, I think because sometimes we have to be our own models, right, for things, because we're the first person doing this thing. It is so important to consider that aspect of where I came from, how I got to where I am, and letting that kind of fuel the way you lead in the world. There was no position that I took, that I ran for, applied for, anything like that, where I didn't always have in the back of my mind, like, how can I serve people through this work? And you just kind of keep that constant, and you start with the small things. So people assume, like, man, you just went to WSU and then next thing I know, you're a president. It's like, no. The very, very first leadership position I ever had, I was like third grade class rep. And I think my accomplishment was I got basketball nets. Like, I don't even think it was me. I think they were already planning to buy them, and they just let me think it was me, right? But I always say, like, do every job, task, position as if it's the most important thing in the world. Like, if you're stacking chairs, if your job is to stack chairs after your club's meeting, be the best chair stacker in the world. Be committed, be passionate about it, because people notice that. and they say, oh, this is someone who actually cares about the work that we're doing, not someone who's looking to be in the front, right? Because that's how I ended, but that's not always how it was. And there was a lot of tough stuff behind the scenes, right? The speeches and things were fun, but that really wasn't where the work was. A lot of the work was done in the background. So I think finding the purpose, finding the why, that's what people say, right? Finding the why. Truly, why do you even care about this? Why does it matter? Once you figure that out, then you kind of go from there. But I would ask people to look at non-traditional examples of models, because the role model doesn't have to be someone who's in the exact position that you want. The role model can be someone in your life that taught you an important lesson, and they were a leader in their own right. Maybe they're a leader in your family. They're a leader, in the community. And there's a lot of lessons and things that you can glean from that. But you'll just pick up a little bit along the way. I watched a lot of like political TV, and I'm not like many of them because I don't know that would be very good, but you still just kind of get to pick up bits and pieces from different people throughout your life.
And Jordan, to close this all off.
Yeah.
And it looks like there might be another question. So I'll just go ahead and ask that before I ask the one that I was thinking for closing us off. But somebody asks, how does someone help themselves if someone in the household is constantly bringing them down when it comes to school?
Yep. So I struggle with this question only because it's really difficult when we have to carry burdens that are not our burdens to carry, right? So like that person's beliefs, thoughts, actions toward you really isn't your responsibility to have to get over. But it's reality, right? So we take it for what it is and we accept it. I think one thing that we have to do when we go through things like that is we have to develop a really strong sense of self and confidence. And you can do that a couple ways. One, if you find things that you're really passionate and engaged in school or in the community, that can kind of be an escape for you. I know for me that was something that even when everything else was going bad or wrong, I could always escape to that. And I found confidence through those things that I was doing because I found respect and love and other people who cared for me and pushed me. When it comes to, again, it's a lot of it is a matter of your mind and figuring out, I hear what this person is saying. Okay, I'm being put down, but at some point, like you have to build, whether that's through looking at your past or setting really big goals for your future, you have to build that sense of who you are and not allow that person to define who you are. And also know that, again, nothing lasts forever. So right now you're being influenced and spoken to in a certain way by this person, but you have to also understand that like you have value beyond that, right? And that your life will go beyond that and go beyond. And that's not a hateful thing. It's not to harbor negative feelings, but it's just to really deal with the reality that maybe this person's not my champion right now. And I have to find other sources that are going to push me and propel me. Sometimes we first-gen students just have to pull our own, right? We have to be our own champion. We have to be our biggest cheerleader. And that is the single best thing that I ever did for myself, was to stop seeking external validation and to start really being able to give myself the love and the care and the confidence that I need. Because you will meet people who believe in you, who know that you have potential. I don't even know you and your name is anonymous, but I can tell you, I know for sure that you have potential and are an incredible person just because you're here and because you're asking questions, you're trying to solve a problem in your life right now. And some of the solutions to our problems lie within, and if you can get past that, if you could just get past that, those thoughts that person's put in your mind and replace them with your own, I think you can do really well. But it's a developing thing, and it's something that we just grow through. But all you can do is work your best, and the proof will be there, right? Your reward will come when you've done the best you can and you've given it all you can. You can't let other people define that for you, because they'll try. And you can listen to it and just keep pushing. That's what I do sometimes. I'm like, you know what, I heard it, but I'm not going to let that be the final word on who I am or who I'm going to be. So hang in there, stay positive, give yourself the boost, give yourself some love. I'm going to say this publicly, look in the mirror and give yourself some praise, give yourself some credit sometimes. Sometimes we need that because the world can be really negative. And if it's writing notes on the, sticky notes on your mirror that give yourself compliments, those things can really help you get through some tough times. So I hope that helps.
Wow, thank you so much, Jordan. We really appreciate your presentation and joining us tonight. We are so honored to present you with the First Gen Alumni Excellence Award. I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. This is a fantastic event, so exciting. One final reminder to join us for our remaining Celebrate First Gen events. The information is in the chat now. And thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone. It was really great to be with you tonight. Thank you, Ray and Allie and Michael. It's good to see you all again. I feel like we're like miles and miles away.
Thank you, Jordan.
Hopefully next time this can be in person.
All right, take care, Jordan.
That'll be so nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.